Are you a thoughtful leader? Maybe you are. Maybe you think you are. Let's find out. I'm Mindy Gibbins-Klein. I'm author of The Thoughtful Leader and host of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. Thoughtful leadership is all about thought leadership that goes above and beyond. Thought leadership that is truly new and original, exciting, disruptive, maybe even groundbreaking. Because let's face it, we need to raise the bar. My guests and I are absolutely obsessed with finding truly original thought leadership, and I'm going to bring you so many exciting ideas and opportunities, things for you to think about, and chances for you to push your thinking that you'll be very glad you tuned in. So thanks so much for checking out Thoughtful Leadership and the Thoughtful Leader podcast. I look forward to connecting with you very, very soon. Welcome to the show. My guest today is the amazing thoughtful leader, Joanne Lockwood. I am so excited that we finally got her here on the show. You are going to love her and all of her information and ideas and tips, and just very, very special episode for you here. So now that I've built her up quite a lot, hello, Joanne.
Thanks, Mindy. No pressure. No, that's some intro. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. I've been looking forward to this, and I'm glad I could be here and joining you today.
Yeah. Well, we're very, very blessed to have you, as I said. So please tell everybody a little bit about your background, your journey, and how you got to where you are now.
So I left school, joined the Royal Air Force in the UK as an electronics apprentice. I left after 3 years, realizing electronics really wasn't my thing. I was more interested in computing, and I then started on a career in computing for 25, 30 years, ran my own IT businesses from the mid-90s onwards. And around about 4 or 5 years ago, I realized my life was coming to a point where things just weren't working. I describe it as past my sell-by date, getting a bit moldy, both in my career, my direction, where I was going, but also my own sense of identity, my gender identity, something that had been playing on me for many, many years. All this came to a head in my late 40s. So in 2017, I sold my business, my shares of my business, to my business partners. They bought me out. Didn't make a fortune, just made enough to keep me going for 2 years, to give me a new start. I gender transitioned and embarked on, if you like, on a second life. I'd like to think that at the age of 50, that's halfway through my life. I'd like to think I've got another 50 years to go. So that would be fantastic. So my big idea was to promote trans awareness at the time. And it quickly sort of spread into inclusion and belonging for all people, because I realized it wasn't just about me. It was about all people. And I was able to leverage my own internal identity, my own fears, my own perceived discrimination, internalized stuff, and also the discrimination I'd faced in the world as well, to have some compassion and empathy for other people in similar positions. So that gives me my sort of kind of superpower to talk about the topic. And obviously over the last 4 years, I've invested in myself heavily to become more of a specialist than I was at the beginning. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell, really.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much for sharing that. I love the way, just casually, I gender transitioned. I mean, that is a topic that's not yet been covered on the show. So you may want to elaborate a bit more, and certainly the thoughtful aspect of it. I'm sure a lot of thought went into it. It wasn't just, the way it sounded. But, seriously, if somebody's planning a big transition of any kind, what thought goes into it? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think it's the old saying, everything you ever desired is on the other side of fear. That sense of fear of change, it was immense. As growing up, I was born in the mid-60s, growing up in the 70s and 80s. I was brought up in a world with 2 average white parents, father in the Navy, both ended up being school teachers. My sphere of reference was kind of on the bell end curve of normal. I was right in the middle of that sort of typical young person in the 70s and 80s. We didn't do anything out of the ordinary. Even my music taste was pretty vanilla at the time. So I always had this thought inside of me. And you kind of go through life with this rule book in your head. Being gay is bad, being lesbian is bad, anybody who's punk or outside the norm is bad, radical, subversive, whatever. And of course, people who were described in those days as transsexual were kind of stigmatized. There was a lot of, I suppose, prejudice. There was documentaries in the 70s around Julia Grant who transitioned. And just the attitude to society in those days was completely negative. You were definitely seen as kind of something really, really weird and unusual. So I grew up with that rule book, realizing that if I ever said anything, spoke my secret, that I would be ostracized and stigmatized by my parents, by my friends. I wouldn't be able to succeed in life. So that was kind of the fear I was trying to overcome. So when it got to my mid to late 40s, the way I described it, I used the word, it became necessary. All the way through my life, I could keep it in a box. I could keep a lid on it. I could work through it. I had two voices in my head. I had a lot of stuff going on in my mind, but it was manageable. But then it got to a point where it became necessary. I couldn't hold it in anymore. My life needed to change. So, yeah, I did put a lot of thought into it because I had a wife. I have got a wife. I've still got a wife. I've got two children. I've got parents who are alive. I've got a brother. And I've got a whole network of friends. In fact, I had a very active and fulfilled life all the way through. I was national president of a man's organisation called the Round Table in the UK. And that was a significant role. So my name and my reputation were very much out there. And I was kind of putting everything on black and spinning the wheel and see what would happen, really, because there is no way of half transitioning, half coming out. Well, not for me. I mean, I know some people maybe can adopt a more non-binary or gender fluid approach, but that wasn't who I was. I needed to spin the wheel and do it. In fact, my family said, make your mind up and get on with it at one point, because it was like, for them, it was like trying to hit a moving target. Was I or wasn't I? And I think the fear was holding me back that I would lose everything still. And I produced like a risk register, did a risk analysis of the transition. And I decided that the one thing I wasn't prepared to sacrifice was the relationship with my wife. And that sounds quite callous when my children weren't in that equation. My parents, my brother wasn't in that equation. It was my wife that was in that equation. And so that was my goal. And we talked a lot over the 3 or 4 years. A lot. Some of it when we were drunk, some of it when we were sober, some of it when we were hungover. In fact, sometimes the drunk conversations were good because we could both speak our mind and forget about what we said the next day. So that they kind of worked. But we did talk a lot. And I very quickly realized that I was being selfish because I wasn't doing it for anybody else. Therefore, the definition of selfish is doing something for yourself. And I soon realized that I wanted to be selfish in the least selfish way possible, be thoughtful, be mindful about the feelings of others. And I soon realized that it wasn't just about me. It was actually more about the people around me and the impact on their lives. I thought about this for 40, 50 years. They've been thinking about it for 5 minutes. So I soon realized that I needed to put more thought into where they were in their journey. And I needed to help be the educator, if you like. And it was tricky. And I often use that, the film with Tom Hanks, Green Mile, where the big black guy, Baba, he sucks the pain out of people. And I felt like that sometimes. So I was in the most painful place in my head. Yeah, I was trying to suck the pain out of everybody else and make it better. So at some points I was the pain giver and the pain fixer, which is hugely stressful. And it wasn't good for me. And my wife was struggling. She would have good days and bad days, and she would have fantastic days and terrible days. And it took a lot of patience on my part to effectively say, I get it. I get the pain you're going through, and I'm here for you, because we stated our objective was to be together forever. And that was always our goal. And we made it. We did a TV documentary, which broadcast on Channel 4 in the BBC, documenting some of that process. If you ever get a chance to watch The Making of Me, you can see some of the pain my wife had at the time when I had my hair refitted. That effectively, I became one person, not the person she married. She couldn't see me at night, if you like, looking different. And my daughter and my son, they both struggled for 2 or 3 years. And I didn't speak to my daughter for 2.5 years until recently. And I wasn't invited to her wedding. And through COVID, the wedding was cancelled. And in the meantime, we've reconciled. We've got together. So I'm now going to be the person who gives her away, performs the speech, traditional speech at the wedding breakfast. So we've resolved that. And I'm in the process of reconnecting with my father. My mum's fine, my brother's fine, and most people are fine. But yeah, it's a gradual process of reconnection. And going back to the theme of this is being thoughtful. It's really making sure that I realize that I need to be mindful and thoughtful about the needs of others. And it's taught me a lot of self-reflection, a lot of learning has gone on in how I see myself, my responsibilities in the world. That's been a growth for me. And I think I am people often say when they transition that they're still the same person on the inside. Yes, I may be fundamentally the same person on the inside, but my values, by the way I look at the world, my empathy, compassion, the causes I value are so different to what they were 5 years ago. So I've evolved as a human being immensely since my transition. And that actually makes me really, really happy because I really love, I don't mean sycophantically, I love myself. I believe in myself and I care about myself now. I'm not saying I didn't before, but I never knew I had to, but now I do.
I'm so honored, impressed. I have so much respect for you, evolved as a person. I was just thinking, Joe, maybe you would have evolved as a person anyway. We don't know. We don't have a sliding doors parallel life scenario available to us. But what you were saying about, selfishness, or let's just say focusing on self and remembering to think of others, it's a constant tightrope, in my opinion. Being thoughtful doesn't mean being thoughtless of yourself. It's just being aware. And of course, in The Thoughtful Leader, I talk about the difference between mindfulness and thoughtfulness. In my view, thoughtfulness has intention, it has energy, and it has a goal, because being mindful is a first step, don't get me wrong. And you became mindful of what you were doing, how you were thinking, the effect on others. But the thoughtfulness, when that came in, that's what really made the difference. That's the action part of it. So there's a lot of people listening to us who maybe don't want to do a gender transition, but transition something important in their life, or transform a relationship, or move from A to B, let's just call it that. What advice would you give people listening now who are really struggling with something big?
The way I approached this was I had to define the goal. I had to know what my endpoint was. And I decided, as I said, it became necessary for me to gender transition. It also became necessary to exit my business. And at various points, I was prepared to walk away with nothing to say, bye, I'm out. Luckily, that didn't happen. Luckily, they offered to buy me out before I walked out, sort of thing. So they obviously knew something was going wrong. But my goal was I had to get out of my business. I wasn't want to do that anymore. And I had an idea about what I wanted to do. I had to get out of my old skin and get into my new skin. That was another thing. And I wanted to keep my wife. So those are my three big ticket items. Underneath those is financial security, home, all of the bottom couple of layers of Maslow. What we're looking for, making sure that I know I can live, survive, and enjoy life still. And what I realized was I had chains holding me down. I often describe it, I felt like I was drowning in a swimming pool with the weight of these chains of responsibilities. And what I ended up doing was looking at each chain as a target and saying, right, why is this holding me back? What can I do to cut that chain? So chain one was selling my business. Chunk. All of a sudden, I didn't have that responsibility. Chain two was transitioning and actually doing it, keeping my family together. All these chains, all these things, all these fears that I had in my head, I just tackled them. And I described it as I transitioned in chunks. So I took bits of my life and introduced people to the new me and just did them one step at a time. So, you could argue I had a program, I had a project, I had a risk register, I had all these things in my head, but it was all around destination planning. It was always thinking about, well, what am I trying to achieve? What's holding me back? What can I do to remove that blocker? So that's, I've got an IT background, I've got a project management background. So those are the techniques I've always used in my career, if you like. And I was now applying them to myself and my life. But I think the key thing for me was knowing where I was trying to go, knowing the steps in which I wanted to take, and then tackle the blockers. And it became a kind of a value proposition. Do I value what I've got more than what I'm going to get? No, I can discard that. I can discard that. I can discard that. Because they were blocking the objective. And I decided the objective was more important than the things, the stuff, what I was hanging on to. I was prepared to risk my reputation, my relationships for that end goal. So yes, destination planning, think of the goal, remove the blockers as I went.
That's really great insight. And I know you've got hindsight, which has led to this insight. For people who are listening to you now and thinking, wow, simple, look at it as a project, have the goal in mind, create chunks, deal with them one by one. It can be as simple as that. It can be simple, but not easy, I'm guessing. Because, the bigger the decision and the more emotional, I would say, the more thought that needs to go into it, and the right kind of thought, not just in your head, not just doing the spreadsheets and the risk analysis, but also from the heart. And that goes on. And, Joe, that's what makes a difference between a thoughtful leader and somebody who's not. And thoughtful leadership is all around us. And yet many people have opportunities to be thoughtful and they don't embrace them. So I'm really, really passionate about people doing the hard thing, taking that leap of faith or leap of heart and doing it thoughtfully. And, that's really what's going to move us forward as a society. So speaking of society, we have a few minutes left, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on our society. Is it thoughtful? Could it be more thoughtful? What does that bring up when I ask you that?
So my first reaction is there's a lot of polarization at the moment. There's a lot of people on the edge, left or right, up or down, whatever that may be. And it's really hard to find people in the center ground to engage in constructive dialogue, constructive rhetoric and discourse. That's what frustrates me about society, is you're either black or you're white. You're either blue or red, whatever it may be, whatever your team is. And it really frustrates me that we don't have a more collaborative coalition type view to solving problems. There are some big ticket items, certainly in my life, which I don't think I have the answer, but I know the answer isn't just throwing rocks at each other and shouting. The answers come around sitting around the table. We've solved a lot of big problems in the world by talking. We've had people sit around the table that you'd never thought possible to get them around the table, because you've got to find that common ground. I think if we can stop the media selling us clicks, polarizing us for our attention, creating tribes. Look at the way Twitter and Facebook and other social media think. The ad revenue that's poured into that to influence people's thinking. I think we really struggle now to have that clarity of thought. So when I think about society, I think about this polarized position where there doesn't seem to be any room in the center to sit down and have a conversation. You have to have an opinion. You have to be pro something or against something. There's not enough of, interesting. Let's talk about this. Let me understand why you think that. More why questions, more, let's talk about this. Go in with a, I could be wrong attitude rather than I'm always right attitude.
That is stunning. I could be wrong. I may not be right. That's a big thing for someone to think in this day and age of having to have opinions. And, I've been part of that whole energy of, mixing things up and asking people to step up and be bold and opinionated. And it needs to be done in the right way. As you and I spoke a few months ago on your podcast, it needs to be bold and opinionated, yet respectful. And maybe that's what's missing. Two things that you said made me think. Number one, the media, well, they may not stop polarizing people, and they may not stop, looking for revenue and doing it any way they can. And therefore, it really is up to us, the consumer of that information, to be discerning and to choose our influences and our influencers. And that is something that most people don't realize they can do. Switching off, going off of social media for a while is one option, but I believe it's possible to be online and to have influences coming at you, but not to be swayed, or not to be swayed so much. That's just something that I think about. The other thing, the really big thing that you said, and I don't know if you meant to say it, but you said about creating tribes. Don't we all need tribes for belonging?
We do. And that is the paradox of belonging, that we often get policed into a box to conform to the view of the tribe, the group think. if all of our friends vote this way and we don't, we think, oh, I'm not sure about that. Can you have that belongingness with your friends? Do you sit in the same room, hearing conversation, thinking, I don't like this? Can you speak your mind? I mean, we see this in the workplace, we see it in society. So I think the danger with having our belongingness, our close tribe, is that we do end up homogenizing. We talk about this affinity bias. We homogenize around the strong view that we're in. And it's very hard to break out of that, because otherwise we become shunned, pushed out of the tribe. We don't fit anymore. We have to change football team. We sort of decide that we cheer the wrong goal, if you like, and suddenly we're ostracized for it. And, I left the man tribe. And again, I was kind of shunned and pushed out, but I was welcomed into the female tribe. So I felt this better sense of belonging that I'd never felt I had. So yes, it's not easy to leave your tribe. It's not easy to leave those views around your faith, belief, religion, whatever that may be, your family values. You may find you have to leave that and say, no, this is what I believe. There's a great saying that if you Google it, you'll find it. It's strong opinions, weakly held. So it's not about the fact in the centrist ground, I don't have opinions. I do have. I have strong beliefs. I have strong views. But I'm prepared to engage in creative doubt. I'm prepared to find out whether I'm right or wrong by starting by, I'm probably wrong. And I ask lots of why questions. Why do you think that? Why is that important to you? Help me understand why I'm different to your thinking. And then we work out where we differ, because fundamentally we probably agree most of the way. Just our conclusions are different, because your socialization, your lived experience is this, and my lived experience is that. You come from the north of England, from a mining town. I come from the south of England, from a naval town. We have different perspectives and we vote different ways because of the culture we've been brought up in. Once I understand that, I say, well, fundamentally, we want great education, great transport, great networks, great lives for everybody. How we get there is just a debatable point.
So true. Thank you very much. I'm not sure that it's right or wrong. I work with words all day long, and I'm now pondering, is it right, wrong? Are you going to move from wrong to right? That's not the point. The point is to become aware that you're in that echo chamber, that you're in that homogenized environment, and that you've got the blinkers on, or blinders from my American friends. You can't see outside of that unless you choose to. So this is what I love about the work that you and I do and our colleagues, is about pushing those boundaries, creating a bigger awareness, kind of playing around at the edges where there is a lot of fear, going back to what you said before. It's scary. It can be challenging. And that's why many people choose not to be thoughtful. They just don't want to think, they bury their heads in the sand. And I'm not even making anybody wrong here. It's just when they have these entrenched opinions and views and they see others as wrong, then it might be useful to encourage a more thoughtful approach. And that's all we're doing here. We have a couple of minutes left. I don't know if you have a last message. And guys, you can find Joanne's stuff in the show notes, links. You can share this. Please share this with your friends. This is such an important topic. But Joe, any last thoughts?
Yeah, can I just pick up your use of the word guys?
Here we go. I'm trying to find this gender.
Yeah, I'm not the language police. I'm not the inclusion police. It's just understanding that some words have connotations beyond your original intent. And I use the word guys myself sometimes. It's ingrained in me, but it's about trying to just flag it up when people use words that have potential connotations for other people. They have a negative impact on people. And we see words that are associated with racism, colonialism, slavery, sexism, etc., etc. And you see these big flame debate wars on LinkedIn saying, no, it's not. It doesn't mean that. And everyone gets their Wikipedia dictionaries out and going, look, see, I told you this and I told you. And we can always research it. And I always say to people is the fundamental point we're trying to reach here, if you understand that word has a negative impact on someone, it costs you nothing to not use that word again. So as I say, there are words that I know are racist, colonialist, based on slavery. I will not use those words because I know they impact somebody negatively. Whether we can debate whether they are or not, it doesn't matter. I know that you may find that offensive, therefore I won't use them.
All right,
I'm
peeps,
I'm not a
you've heard
police.
her.
Yeah.
All right, peeps. Or there was a whole list on Facebook of words you could choose, and perhaps you want to, if you have that list, put it somewhere for people, because it's not intentional. It's just, as you say, ingrained. We literally have 1 minute left, because I make it a point not to go over the 25 minutes, 30 max. Any last points? Any last message for people listening?
I mean, again, it's about being thoughtful. And I think what I've learned is to understand my own footprint in the world, my impact on others. And I always say that most of us don't get up in the morning to create negative impact, to create negative feeling. We want to be generous of soul and spirit and contribute to the world. So I'm always very mindful and thoughtful, deliberate about this, about my own impact on the world. And if I can correct my behavior to be less impactful in a negative way to somebody else, it doesn't cost me anything. And that's what I always say. It doesn't cost me anything to change, to find a better way of living, breathing, and participating in the world. That's my final thought.
I've loved this conversation, and I know the listeners will really love it as well. And peeps, if you have loved it, please share the link and subscribe. We have lots of other fascinating guests we've had before. You can listen to the previous episodes, and we have some coming up. But possibly this one will be hard to beat, because it's been a fantastic insight into, I feel, not just inclusion, belonging, but really thinking deeply about your impact on others. And thanks for bringing that up. That's what it's all about. If you don't care, fine. If you do care about your impact on others, there are thoughtful ways to approach decisions and life in general. So thank you so, so much, Joanne Lockwood. I'm really grateful for you having been here today.
Pleasure, Mindy. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Thoughtful Leader, and I hope it's inspired you to be more thoughtful as a leader in your business. Please consider subscribing and leaving a review. An important question for you. Do you want to create a culture of thought leadership in your organization? My best-selling book, The Thoughtful Leader, is available now on Amazon and many other sites in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats. Please visit www.mindygk.com for more great content. That's www.mindygk.com. Speak to you again soon.